Come on in, everyone. The water's warm. And for those of you who are not from the Allen Institute, if you can, move towards the center so that we have the late arrivals can take the seats on the edge. But I'm really excited that you guys are all here, and I know that there's a ton of folks that are also experiencing this virtually. I'm Aaron Coe, and I'm on behalf of the innovation team here at the Allen Institute. I want to welcome all of you. My colleagues Arden Yang, Angela Yang, and Debbie Renault are really excited to have you here, as well as the partners that we've established with the University of Washington and the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center. It's really great to have Fiona here. It's also great to see Rachel. Thank you guys for bringing in some of your colleagues. And today's really the spirit of this event is to try to increase not just the affinity of our organizations, but also the avidity. And by that I mean it's not just one or two people in our organization that partner with each other to make these partnerships work, but also the scientific champions that relate to each other that drive a lot of the great work that we get to do. And so today we're going to have a fireside chat, and afterwards we'll go into our atrium and hopefully we'll start to establish some real human connections over food and drink. And so thank you, Amity Addrisi, for leading this discussion. I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yes.
And we'll get going.
I see a few people still straggling in, but we will get started.
So
welcome.
I forgot one housekeeping detail. When we do get to the Q&A, we have some runners that will bring microphones for all the folks who are enjoying this online. And so they can't hear you if you're only speaking to the auditorium. So raise your hand and we'll get a mic in your hands.
And don't worry, I'll remind you before we go there. Again, welcome to the Allen Institute. As Aaron said, my name is Amity Addrisi. I am in the communications department here. And we're really thrilled to have you all in this room for what's going to be a really fascinating and powerful discussion about how we can revolutionize the scientific process. So we're going to be exploring new funding models, innovative partners designed to be really the next big catalyst for research and discovery. So we've assembled this incredible panel, which you're about to meet, who are going to take us through how and why forward-thinking, creative models are accelerating scientific progress. So the core of our discussion will center on new private partnerships and their role in speeding up discovery and really reshaping the research landscape. So again, we are privileged to have these distinguished panelists on stage, each of whom brings a unique perspective on innovation and partnership in science. And I will first introduce Thong Lee, Investment Director at the Gates Foundation. He is a distinguished figure in life science venture capital, highly recognized for creating and advancing next-generation biotech companies. Evelyne Viegas, Technical Advisor at Microsoft Research, driving research exploration strategy by scouting external innovation and nurturing collaborative projects. Also the co-developer of Accelerating Foundation Models Research, or AFMR, which you will hear me referring to it as in the future. And we're going to ask her about that in a moment. Jeff Leek, Chief Data Officer and Professor at Fred Hutch. He is a pioneering figure in AI and genomics, recognized on the Time AI 100 list. Leek also co-founded the Cancer AI Alliance, which uses privacy-preserving federated learning across, did I say that right? Okay, just checking. Across different places to build the world's most comprehensive research center and research laboratory. So additionally, he is the co-CEO and co-founder of Synthesize Bio, a startup developing generative genomics and foundation models to predict the results of future human genomics experiments. It's a mighty thing to do. So I thought we would start off with a bit of a lightning round, just to give a flavor, asking each of our panelists to share a model or initiative that they're involved in that exemplifies innovation in science. And Thong, I'm going to start with you if that's okay.
Yeah.
You have made a career as an investor, and you've been crucially involved in company formation. How are you bringing that experience to the Gates Foundation? Like, what is your vision and your organization's vision on how you deploy capital to move science forward?
Yeah. Well, so first of all, I just want to start by thanking you guys for having me here. It's actually the first time I've physically been here in the Allen Institute, and we were just talking about how we walk by here all the time, but don't have the opportunity to be able to see actually what's been built here. So I've been now at the Gates Foundation for just under a year. I joined in December. My background has primarily been in working with early stage innovations and in building companies. I did a stint, pretty long stint, over a dozen years, overseeing and leading a life science venture fund called Accelerator Life Science Partners, which was established by some of the top venture funds in the industry to orchestrate early stage company building. And so for the last decade, I've been working with that team to build just over a dozen companies that I have worked on around primarily university-based innovations. A lot of spin-outs from entities like Princeton and Columbia and a number of other places where we have planted our flag and tried to build companies. So I left that just a little less than a year ago, was brought into the Gates Foundation to oversee a function called the Strategic Investment Fund, which is the investment arm of the Gates Foundation that makes all of the equity, debt, and strategic market tools that we use to incentivize companies to work with the foundation. And so what we're trying to do at the foundation is leverage the tremendous amount of financial resources that we have to help companies along in their journey to build and deploy technologies in the areas that are important to the foundation. And our fundamental premise is that we're trying to help people, no matter where they live in the world, to be able to live a better and productive life. And so we do that by enabling the access to vaccines, providing access to drugs, developing things like digital public infrastructure, payment systems, all of the foundational things that you actually need so that you can be productive in society and have access to good healthcare. And our focus is primarily in the lower middle income countries and in the developing world. So think like sub-Saharan Africa, South and Southeast Asia, regions where they don't have the same kind of tools and capabilities that we would have in the developing world. So when we think about innovation, when we think about ways of trying to bring that to those ecosystems, we still have a strong interest, and Bill in particular has a strong interest in upstream innovation. So the foundation overall is still funding a fair amount of that work. And in fact, I think next year we're planning to deploy something close to $9 billion, if not more, just in the combination of grants and investments that we're making. We certainly don't want to supplant some of the resources that have been pulled away from the federal government, but we do want to continue to fund innovation where it's going to make a big difference. And we've also now increased that focus because we're planning over the next 20 years to fully deploy the foundation's resources and all of the wealth that Bill has generated in his lifetime. And so that gives us a platform of over $200 billion that we'll be investing in research and in development in areas that matter for us. So we are actively investing still in this environment, and we are still looking at models that we can invest in where we can deploy capital, philanthropic capital and also investment capital, which we oversee, to accomplish that goal. And we can talk a little bit more about some of the details of that. But it's a tremendous privilege to be able to do that with an organization that truly still cares about innovation.
It's a gift as well, a privilege and a gift. Thank you. Evelyne, Microsoft is also very passionate about investing in research. Microsoft Research committed to community initiatives like accelerating foundation models research, or AFMR. Let's talk about that resource a little bit. How do you plan to engage the broader community in reimagining computer research with initiatives like that?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thank you too for having me here. And again, first time for me in this building, beautiful building. So Accelerating Foundation Model Research, or AFMR, I'll first talk about what it is and then why we did it. So what it is, it's actually a couple of things. One is a global research network, and the other one is a resource platform. So as a research global network with AFMR, what we are looking for is really to build collaborations where we can foster partnerships and projects which are going to look at AI looking at actually the variety and diversity of research questions that we need to address. Also bringing together people who come from different disciplines, from different institutions, and also different sectors. This is an initiative which is really focused on AI. And so when we talk about AI, different perspectives are just so important. Now, as a resource platform, what it is, it's really a platform where we provide access to Azure credits to the academic community so that the community can do the research. So now, why did we do it? So now I'm going to bring us back to November 2022, when there was this big ChatGPT moment, which is the moment where AI, which is not new, it has been talked about and researched for quite a few decades, but it's the first time in November 2022 that AI came as this mature technology in the public discourse, right? Everybody's like, wow, AI. So it wasn't just sci-fi anymore, it was AI is there. And so on our side, so in industry, of course, we had been working on this type of research, right, that OpenAI has been leading. And it was very clear that computing research was going to evolve, was going to change, to your earlier question, like, what are we doing, right? So it was very clear. And actually, as a matter of fact, we had been working with some people in the academic community to understand the challenges that this type of technology was bringing, and also the opportunities. But when this moment came, we were able actually to provide this OpenAI technology via the Azure platform, which is actually which can scale industry-grade level, which can also be trustworthy, having privacy, specifically in the context of health projects. So then we're able to scale that effort. And now just to go, actually talk a little bit about my background. When there was this ChatGPT moment, so my background is, as an undergrad, I did math and computer science. And for my graduate studies, I did computational linguistics, natural language processing. And when this AI moment came, I was like, wow, how would I now teach natural language processing if I was a professor, right? Because I was taught very modular, with a very modular approach, where we start to understand language, you start with tokenization. We still do that. But then we do some syntactic processing, semantic processing, pragmatics, discourse level. And now we just go to pragmatics. Forget about the rest. I was like, you know. So anyway, also questions about how should we teach now? And so there were all that. We felt really strong that we had to do something and work with the academic community. Thankfully, at Microsoft Research, we have a long tradition of working with the academic community and globally. And so we built that program with those two goals I was talking about, right? To build that global research network, to exchange ideas, to have discussions, provide that resource platform with Azure credits. And we thought at the beginning, let's see how we can help with changing how we do computing research. And we focus on three goals. The first one was, let's look at how we can ensure that the AI is going to be aligned with humans and individuals and societal's values, preferences, and goals. The other one was about ensuring that different AIs can interact in a successful way with humans, so making sure that those interactions are also beneficial. And last but not least, which I think is relevant probably a bit more to also to the audience here, is how the AI can help accelerate scientific discovery. And so we did an open call. We're also curious, would actually the academic community engage? And the response was fantastic. And move forward a year later, and actually when we saw what came back from the community, it was both inspiring and humbling. one of the first things, and I think I will summarize it as one size does not fit all. That's really what came back. Like people, the academic community was telling us, actually, we are all talking about large language models. Well, it's not just large language models. Maybe we should be thinking about small language models. Some people were talking about tiny language models. So that's one. The other one was like, well, you know what? It's not just one modality. It's not just about text. There is speech. There is vision. There is, again, multimodality. Another one was like, well, great. English is, we all speak English or try to. I'm French originally. And then it's not just about one language, right? There are different languages. Actually, there are different cultures. So how do we think about designing AI up front with that in mind? Yeah. And then there are different domains, application domains with different requirements. If you think about, for instance, education, people are thinking, well, great, AI is going to help us learn. What about critical thinking? And then, different domains like law, et cetera, et cetera. So we learned a lot, actually, in terms of we have to work with different domains. And the conclusion of that is, for us, for me in particular, it was like, it's so important when we think and we talk about reimagining computing research. There are really different perspectives. There is the industry perspective that we bring. There is the academic perspective, the research government agencies perspective. So we are all in to think about how we're going to really reimagine computing research.
Right.
But we'll have to do it.
And with the data, what do you do with all that data? I want to stay with the theme of AI when we speak with you, Jeff, because I want to know about the Cancer AI Alliance. I don't know if a lot of people have heard that from Fred Hutch lately, but I really want you to share more about it. What are your hopes for the AI Alliance for the future of this initiative to take that data, to transform research using responsible AI and that shared data?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it relates to what we've heard already. The Cancer AI Alliance was formed almost exactly 1 year ago. And the idea behind it was, AI is very data hungry. Really, to build these complex models, especially multimodal models, you need an incredible amount of data, but you also need to preserve patient privacy when you're building these models. And so the Fred Hutch is an incredible place and one of the world-class cancer institutions, but it's not enough patient data to really build these complex foundation models at scale. And so we were thinking about, how do we do that at scale? How do we do that at scale nationally? And the idea that we came up with was really there are many challenges to pooling all of the patient data together, especially once you start talking about identifiable patient records, regulatory requirements, and so forth. And so there had been these developments in technology, especially out of industry, around federated learning. And so we thought, what if we could put together an alliance that brought together the top technology companies in the world and the top cancer centers to set up a federated learning network across cancer centers around the country to enable researchers to develop these models, working with collaborators across cancer centers and between industry and academics. So that was the idea, literally an idea, like 12 months ago. And at the time, I had a couple of colleagues that were on the board of advisors of the Fred Hutch, and they had really good connections and friends in industry. Their friends are Satya Nadella and Jensen Huang and Andy Jassy. And my friends are chief data officers of other cancer centers, and so maybe a little bit of a different class of characters there. So I called my friends, and they called their friends, and we kind of got everybody together, and we formed this alliance, which had tech companies helping us set up infrastructure across these 4 cancer centers to enable this federation and to enable model training. And over the course of 1 year, we set up a whole new regulatory pathway, identified and built a common data model for the electronic health record data and associated multimodal data of these cancer centers, linked them together, and then set up a cloud platform that securely allows federated learning across multiple clouds. So each cancer center was working with a different cloud service provider, and so we have all of the major cloud service providers are participating together in one standards-based way. And so they all, you can train across multiple clouds, across multiple cancer centers. So we did this for 4 cancer centers and announced our progress on October 1st. And so now we have 8 pilot projects running with across these cancer centers, dozens and dozens more that are getting prioritized right now. And now we're scaling and expanding both the types of data that are included in the Cancer AI Alliance, as well as the number of cancer centers. So there's a lot of other cancer centers that are now asking to join. And so the plan is to expand this to a national and international network of cancer centers. Federated learning has its warts and their challenges, as people in the computing space know. There are many challenges to it, but it's really appealing from a regulatory perspective for regulated data. And it deals with a lot of the issues that we also have with data sovereignty issues once you start crossing country borders and things like that. And so it's a real opportunity for us to expand the scope of what data we can bring to bear to answer the most pressing questions in cancer research.
So you really rely on these big partnerships.
Absolutely, yeah.
This is so how important when we're talking about this, and you're talking about patient data, you're talking about the sensitivity of the data, how important is trust in these cross-sector collaborations of all types?
Absolutely. I think when there are two kind of key phrases that we use, and one of them that have described this alliance, and one is this is a trust-based exercise. And so there really has had to be this deep trust and partnership between the organizations that enabled us to move very quickly. And so we've worked with, one of our collaborative partners is one of the Allen Institute. Allen Institute for AI has been a close partner, and we've been now talking a lot more to the other Allen Institutes as well about how to get integrated with the data from those institutes. So it's nonprofit sector, it's the for-profit sector with Microsoft, NVIDIA, Google, Amazon, Deloitte, Slalom, and then it's the not-for-profit cancer centers all coming together. And you would go to these meetings, and we'd be trying to figure out some thorny issue with patient privacy, and nobody would know who was from Microsoft and who was from AI2 and who was from Fred Hutch and who was from Memorial Sloan Kettering. We were all just trying to solve this important problem. So it was very cool to see that ethos.
It really makes it successful then.
It does. It really helps drive that success.
Thong, I want to go back to you because you did explain a bit about the Gates Foundation strategy and what you're planning to do now in your role. How do you then get involved with the data and the discoveries released from huge, ambitious research efforts from institutions like the Allen Institute, UW, and Fred Hutch?
Yeah. So one of the benefits that we have is, as an organization, right, we've got a pretty sizable operation, over 40 program teams, 40 program strategy teams dispersed across our 6 different divisions. And so those groups are actively interacting and interfacing with academia, providing grants in many cases, and supporting a lot of that work. Mm-hmm. And most of our job involves just, we're actually wrestling with this very issue because I just was at a retreat, for a group within the foundation that is focused on using AI to enable cures for some of the things that are important for us. And one of the challenges that we're wrestling through is, as a foundation, when you fund this kind of work, how can you, enable that so that the data and the information that is being funded and supported is broadly available, made broadly available for the charitable goals. At the same time, the focus for some of the things that are of interest to us are often less commercially interesting. So cancer, on the one hand, very commercially attractive in many sectors, and you can find private partners to work on that, generate the data, and then commercialize that. Not necessarily so much in areas like malaria, TB, HIV, et cetera. But what we found is that in bringing some of that data together and supporting some of that work, you can create an expansive body that can then be used to do multiple things. And so a lot of the trick for us now is just navigating some of the thornier issues around how can you get people together in the same way that you have? How do you bring those partners together? How do you get people to be open about the data? Allow that to be able to be used in the ways that it needs to, but ensure that for a foundation like ours, that the ability to access that for very specific global health, interests that we have the ability to be able to do that and fund that and take that forward so that we can deliver that therapy, that vaccine that might come from that work. That's part of the challenge that we have, and we're actually actively right now trying to figure some of that out. And I think the fair thing to say is that we're still in the very early innings of that because this technology modality is still very early for us. And what we are concerned about is that there's disproportionate access. So in other words, here in the developing world, the ability to be able to develop these data sets and the analytics and use them, you have the ability to do that. Is that same access that's the same case in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa or India or other places like that? And so part of what we're trying to do is to think about and fund ways so that we can enable that access across the board and then be able to use that data in the ways that are going to be the most interesting for us and for our needs.
Yeah, and on that note of access, Evelyne, I want to talk to you because Microsoft supports the National Artificial Intelligence Research Resource, or NAIR, as it's called, which is an NSF initiative to democratize access to AI resources like you were just speaking of. As a leader in AI, how do you balance that freedom of academic research with what is also the pressure to create these practical real-world tools?
This is such a great question. And so timely. There is so much intensity, especially in AI. So, so we have to respond to the company as part of Microsoft. We all have to make sure that we can build best-in-class AI products, right? And so that can come with some incremental advances that are important and we all need to participate in. At the same time, we need to make sure that we continue to be highly relevant. And that's in a highly competitive and fast-changing landscape. So we need to do both. So often we say A and B, and then there is ambiguity of and, which could be or, depending, on the life cycle of research. But really, we need to do both. And so we need to make sure we are relevant, not just for today, but also for tomorrow. And of course, we cannot predict tomorrow. So how do we do that? So one way we do that is actually by working and building partnerships, like we're all talking about that. This is so important to collaborate and to partner. And I'll talk about a couple of examples. You mentioned one, I'll come back to it in a second. But there are another one, for instance, very early on, we participated in co-funding partnership in AI. So Eric Horvitz, who is the chief scientist at Microsoft, really played a fantastic role there to really ensure that when we develop AI, it's going to be beneficial for everyone. And this is, the partnership in AI is actually a not-for-profit, and there are so many institutions who are participating, industries, civil societies, academic institutions, and so really a fantastic effort. And the other one there, which goes back to we are in industry, so what's our strength? And specifically in the context of AI, one of our strengths is to be able to build with those big data centers, to have tons of compute and also services, not just the raw compute, but also provide AI services. And so with that, we partner also with research government agencies. And so a couple of years ago, we worked with NSF, National Science Foundation, to see if actually we could, not just Microsoft, but several industries, provide access to resources. I talked about AFMR, that's what we did, but we don't have the resources that federal government agencies have, right? And we are industry, right? And we have agendas, right? We are Microsoft. So really to advance research, we also need to partner with federal research, with research government agencies who can actually really scale that and across working with different industries. And so that's exactly what we did, right, with NAIR. And not just Microsoft, but many other industries are participating. That's a pilot, a 2-year pilot, with the intent to show the value of providing not just, of course, there are potentially public clouds, but also all the work that we've done in industry, but just can we also provide some of that so that the whole nation can continue to drive innovation in AI.
So on that, what are, in your opinion, some great ways for scientists from our various institutions to interface with counterparts at MSR? What are some of the best ways that they can be doing that?
Yeah, so I was going to say, well, there are practical ways, like we have a research website, like you have here, we all have, you can go there, see what we're working on. We also do some podcasts. We have some sessions, quarterly sessions, which are called Research in Focus, where the researchers actually feature what's top of mind. And so that's one way to learn about what we're doing. We have sometimes call for proposals, like AFMR. The initiative I talked at the beginning is one of them, so you can also learn about that. And then I was going to say, we're local, right? We're just on the outside of the tiny pond here. That's not the big one, UK, right? So we are local. I think we can I just mentioned it's the first time I come here. Thank you for the invitation, but we need to do more of that, more of those type of events that you have here, right? And we do some also at Microsoft, and I'm sure in some other institutions. So it's really about the network, discussions. And then, so some of them are going to be just organic too. It's like, wow, I think that sounds interesting, what they're doing. Just, have a conversation, right? Conferences. It's another venue where the researchers congregate. So just go talk. Let's talk to each other when we go to those venues and avenues. So I think these are a concrete way to do that. The other thing I would mention is, so I know we're talking also here about new models of innovations, looking also at the evolving landscape for funding. And one thing I want to mention is that I think really that, specifically when we talk about like how we can all actually bring together our strengths and our differences and bring them together so that we can actually continue to drive innovation. I think it's super important, even more than ever, maybe than before, to have those conversations about how can we continue to drive innovation together and really understanding that we all have different agendas, different means. And just some numbers I was looking at, reminded a few days ago about, when you look at who is funding and how much is funding research in the US. Today, don't quote me on exact numbers, but kind of roughly, like today, the research government agencies fund about 50, a bit above 50. It used to be much more, but this is kind of the landscape now. The other 40% is actually funded by foundations and not-for-profit. And there is about less than 10% funded by industry. And if you look at what industry funds, it's going to be mostly mature technologies that can scale. And so there is room for everything, I think. And we need to figure out, we need to come up with creative ideas, creative solutions so that we can continue to do fundamental research in academia. I mean, that's, in industry, we are not foundations or we are not for profit, right? But yet we can also provide scenarios, what we learn with the technologies that we have, the infrastructure which can scale, so anyway, I just wanted to say like how important, like we are all in it together.
Yeah. Well, did you have a?
No.
Oh, I was just going to say, Evelyne had mentioned, these mature ideas, and you are kind of the father of these little ideas that you've helped grow so much of. So I have to ask your advice on how scientists can better engage with funders, both private, industry, philanthropic, in your opinion.
So we see a wide range of different things that are looking for funding, right? So it's all the way from, research that's being done at the benchtop that is needing further funding to advance. And then we also, and I have a strong passion for entrepreneurship, right? So people who have the nugget of an idea that typically comes from a place like academia, and then they want to take that on the next journey so that you can actually develop a product in the beginnings of that. I think that in this environment, I mean, your statistics are pretty right on, because that's about right? I mean, about half of our funding today for research is coming from the government, and then all of the other sources are now being pressured to step up as that percentage decreases. So I think that to get funding for these projects, whether or not it's either research or even for small companies, I think that you just have to think ahead about where you want to be able to create value. In the context of a small or private company, investors are looking hard around like what are the specific milestones that you're going to get to that demonstrates either the proof of concept that the idea that you're working with actually has some legs. And the second thing that they're looking for is like true evidence that you've got really the beginnings of a product that will be valuable in the commercial marketplace, that they can look at and tie a dollar figure to and say, hey, look, if I invest, pick the number, 20, 30, $50 million, and I help you develop that drug and it goes into clinical studies and it gets through that, I can see a path for this being a $1 billion plus drug because it addresses these markets and it addresses these shortcomings. So I think that in today's environment when funding is tougher, you just have to be able to do a lot more for, you got to get a lot more bang for your buck. You've got to be able to stretch your budget and be able to show that you can create a lot of value and that you're very disciplined about using the capital. Because as an investor, that's what we're looking for today. And then the other thing I think that's happening is that because the funding environment today is still a little bit tougher, investors like us, whether or not it's, at the Gates Foundation or Accelerated Life Science Partners or any other fund, we're trying to syndicate our risk. So in other words, when we're trying to fund a project, we're trying to ensure that there is sufficient capital to get to that valuable milestone. And we often recognize that we can't do it alone. In some cases, we can start the things, we can fund some portion of that journey, and we will want to continue to support it, but we can only do so much as a single group. And I think that you've identified this dynamic well. You do much better when you can collect all of that group together and fund that as a group so that as things continue, you can fall back on that very same group to be able to support and continue to advance that technology or product. So I think that from the standpoint of a researcher or somebody like, that is in this audience or an entrepreneur, the advice is still the same, which is you have to think very carefully about your plan. You have to think about who you're targeting. You have to think very clearly about the value that you're going to create for the development that you're going to do. And you have to be able to do that with not just one investor anymore. Now you got to bring the posse together to make it happen, right?
Keep an eye on the long game of the results.
Yeah.
Speaking of results, Jeff, after 10 years, let's say, looking 10 years down the line, how do you measure success of something like the Cancer AI Alliance or Kaya? Do you call it Kaya for
Kaya, yep, Kaya
okay.
is the way you say it, yeah.
So are there major milestones that you're hoping to achieve? Is that something that is tangible?
Yeah, so there's both major milestones in the short term. I think another thing is sort of short term and long term thinking. You have to, when you bring a group together like that, if you just say the long term milestone, and you're doing the stuff under the hood all the way along, it sort of, people lose interest. So you have to have the sort of short term milestones and long term milestones. In the short term, our goal is to enable this system to accelerate research for cancer researchers around the country. Right now, we're already, just because of the technology, data systems, and regulatory processes we've set up for using these data, a multi-institution AI project that used to take 2 to 3 years to set up, we can now do in 2 to 3 weeks. So that's a pretty incredible acceleration of scientific research that we can get faculty to have ideas, build those ideas out, and develop models much more rapidly. Obviously, we want to expand that over the next couple of years to faculty at many other cancer research centers and connect them together. But the ultimate goal is to use that to optimize care. And so there's different ways you can think about what you would use AI for, and obviously there are many different applications in many different fields of study. In the biomedical sciences, there's sort of an irreducible amount of time it takes to bring a drug to market. Even if you have the most innovative idea, a new protein that was designed by the Institute for Protein Design here at University of Washington, and we know it's going to work, you still have to do preclinical studies, phase 1 trial, phase 2 trial, phase 3. That takes irreducibly a period of time. But we also know from research in both developed countries and developing countries that there are many treatments that we know would work better for individual patients, but we don't always give the right frontline treatment or the right second-line therapy. And so just care optimization, given what we already know and what the treatments we already have, can have an incredible impact. And so a way we've been talking about this is what is the number of millions of life years saved that we can do just by optimizing care. And so we have started to think about how do we quantify the developments that we make in AI, how do we apply them, and then how do we validate them? How do we actually measure their success in downstream studies to quantify the amount of life years you save by optimizing care with a new AI model. And so I think one of the things that's been really interesting to see about this application is we're at the very beginning of that journey where we're developing those new models and we have those early milestones. But the long-term milestones are really how do we validate and confirm that these AI models that we've developed are actually having an impact, or actually changing the way that we practice medicine, or actually changing patient experience. And so we have both these short-term milestones, but if you ask me the long-term 10-year milestones, is we have that quantification. How many life years are we saving from these optimizations? And that's a long journey, and it's going to require the public-private partnership to continue for those 10 years. And so thinking about how do we put together that syndicate that lasts, it's not just 1 year, but actually takes us through that long-term journey.
Yeah. That's validation.
Yeah.
Life years.
That's the goal.
Thank you for that. We have some time, and I wanted to open the conversation up to everyone here because I want to give us as much time as possible. So we are going to have some folks ready to hand you a microphone. Are there any questions right off the gate? Oh, we got one right in the back already. Juliet, I think there's a gentleman right in the back that, way back. Now you have to do your steps, Aaron.
I got it.
And if we can just limit it to one question, and if we have time for follow-ups afterwards.
I had a question about the Cancer AI Alliance. Are you expecting discoveries in terms of new cancer therapies or automation of existing therapies or existing care?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think just to clarify, we hope to be able to enable both kinds of research. But certainly if you're talking about, one of the things that's been interesting about trying to hold together an alliance of people who are tech companies and cancer centers is the change of, one of those operates at one speed and one operates at a very different speed. So you have to kind of think about how do you think about what are our short-term goals that we can move very quickly on and what are our longer-term goals. In the short term, optimization is really the path to actually having an impact in the short term because you don't have to develop a new therapy, you don't have to get it through trials, you have to optimize existing therapies, existing approaches. But longer term, you want to enable the kind of discoveries that will actually lead to cures. You just can't measure those in 1 year, 2 year, 5 year timeframes. You have to be looking out farther. And so we, to the point of you need to have some short-term milestones to keep everybody engaged and excited, and you have to have this long-term vision that's going to support discovery of cures that are farther out, and then have realism about how long does it really take to get out there.
Jeff, I have a question for Kaya too.
Okay.
So briefly, my background is I'm a director of CT research at UW Radiology.
Great.
And I've been working on a few of the Kaya projects, and I did not know it's a 1-year-old initiative.
Yeah. Good to meet you.
And I don't have friends like Satya Nadella, not even the chief data officers. My friends are all principal investigators across different academia. In the past, I was at MGH, now I'm on the West Coast.
Yeah.
My question is, the academia probably know each other well in terms of, as you said, the pace of research and all. What's new for us is the industry and the AI. What can it do and what it cannot do? So far, I mean, I know the partners, but I don't know the strategy behind, and I'm sure there's a strategy about how the dollar will be distributed, but I'm interested in how we can leverage the in-kind resources which can come from industry. So to think early as a researcher, for example, what can Microsoft bring in or what can NVIDIA bring in terms of segmentation? And so I haven't seen any sort of public knowledge around this, so anything which can be shared.
Yeah, happy to share a little bit, and then I think this might be a question for you too, and maybe you as well. So specifically around the Cancer AI Alliance, there's a collection of in-kind resources in terms of professional services and cloud credits, which are being distributed to researchers at all of the institutions via a scientific peer review process. And like, that's not just me deciding who gets what. There's like a group that gets together and they all decide. And so there's a process for deciding those. And there are a large number of in-kind compute credits that have been donated by all of the major cloud services providers, which is really great. And so that's some advantage. And then You mentioned did you say you're in pathology? Radiology, okay. So we're also reaching out to radiology, pathology, et cetera, to bring in imaging data. Right now, most of the data is around the structured and unstructured EHR data, and we're expanding the scope over time. So there's a roadmap for expanding data sources. But I'd be really curious about how you think about the relationship between Microsoft and researchers who we have here in Seattle, how you might form those collaborations as well.
Yeah, so I think, so in terms, I'll start with talking about the type of resources, and in terms of collaborations, so we do it via call for proposals, like the initiative I talked about at the beginning here, AFMR, was an open call for proposal, right? There is also, I mentioned NAIR, which is not just Microsoft, there are several other industries and companies who are involved. And this is also open call. And actually the selection there is not the company selecting, it's a panel from NSF. In terms of the resources that are provided, so for AFMR, we provided access to, via Azure AI Foundry, to the model. So there is a model catalog. So if you go to Azure, and I'm sure if you go to other company, so you can see what are the models, and then depending on the programs, some models are available, others may not be available, and we do that via some credits that we provide for projects, right? It goes back open science, at least for this type of program, the same for NAIR. It goes back, so it's, you can use the credits and then publish the research, share with others, because again, it's about like sharing the knowledge and potentially help drive innovation. And then there is also not just services, where there are, so I talked about the models, services, think of the whole stack, cloud stack. And then there is also some compute. And compute, I'm sure you're all aware, there are some type of compute and some resources which are really, really expensive. And by expensive, I mean that not enough for all the work and workloads that people want to do with them. And so, and these have to be prioritized, and there are committees, and depends on the program, on the project, and trying to stage some of those demands. But I will say it's like, look at NAIR if you haven't. I don't know the details of Kaya, by the way, but you can provide that information. But basically, think about models availability, the whole cloud stack, services, and then the compute itself in terms of, for instance, specifically GPUs, that depending on the region, so you have to go and see. But hopefully that helps. Mm-hmm.
Thong, did you have anything to add?
No, I think the role that a foundation like ours can play is very similar to what's been talked about here, which is we can help to convene a lot of the different stakeholders that need to have a role in this. And then we also are a major funder of these kinds of initiatives as well. So we're trying to use a combination of both the funding and the convening ability to figure out exactly what are the kinds of tools that we want to be able to make available in the context of AI, so that we can enable the work that we want to see done in the applications that are of interest to us.
I have more questions on that, but I said I would turn it to the audience. So who's next?
Yeah. Thank you very much for this conversation. I want to take the question in a different direction. It's really for all three of you, but it was highlighted in something that Evelyne said. So I work at the University of Washington. I'm a mathematician, but my role right now is to support our science departments and our scientists in the mathematical, physical, and life sciences. And UW does a really good job, and CoMotion is our leader in terms of taking translational research out and connecting it with the larger world. But we also do fundamental research. And I know all of you, because of your deep backgrounds, you know in your fields the value of the fundamental research that all of this is built upon. And so I would love to hear your perspectives, especially when we're in an era where public support for fundamental science research is being threatened. What can we do better in the academy? And how can we still create a vibrant ecosystem of foundational research that feeds the innovation, that drives industry, that drives solutions that impact lives, but is not just always pointed from the get-go at translational research, because that foundational piece is the roots that everything's built on, at least from my perspective. So I would love to hear, your thoughts on that.
We definitely agree with that here at the Institute. Thong, did you?
Well, I'll start with that, which is to say that it's a challenging problem to solve, right? Because in light of the fact that the federal government has pulled back a significant amount of funding, I mean, this is a problem that has hit front and center to the Gates Foundation, as this is happening, real time, and taking apart USAID is another example where we relied on that mechanism to provide that last mile of distribution for products and services that we heavily fund with the government and other partners. So how do you adapt in a world like that, right? How do you still continue to fund the work that is still important? And I guess I don't have a single answer. I think that, from a foundation like ours, even with an endowment as large as we have made the strategic decision to not be backfill funding. In other words, we can't go in and replace money that the federal government would normally fund for this. On the other hand, we are trying to ensure that the funding that we provide is catalytic for the needs that we want. So I think that the thing that I can offer, which it sounds like you're already doing because you're partnering with a number of different groups, you're working with CoMotion, and you're trying to kind of better understand how the work within the department fits and can support other work. I think that where academic work and research can really benefit is that it's a function of taking a look to the longer time horizon and seeing where that work can really be applied so that it can create ultimately a product, a service, a value that will be of some commercial or longer term interest, right, to the industry. And I think that if you can start to direct some of that work, there will be funding that'll be available to that because, it's a function of being able to see where that work is going to go and being able to support that. And I know that at least from the foundation's perspective, we're still funding early research. We're not pulling away from that. We're continuing to fund research and even early research, but we're looking specifically for the kinds of things that are going to be, in the time frame that we're looking for, which is now, 20 years or so, and even beyond that. It's got to be catalytic so that we can look at that and say, oh man, we're going to invest in vivo gene editing, even though that modality is early. But if that works, that's going to lead to potentially a cure for HIV, TB, or some of these other things. So I would take a hard look at the research and the work that you're doing and the partnerships you're building and try to think ahead about where that might lead and to try to direct yourself to those parties and say, look, you're funding this work now because it's going to be an on-ramp to getting to this other point, which is going to be ultimately valuable.
So I'll start by saying, I think you mentioned that you don't want all foundations cannot replace government. And I was actually, for industry, you do not want that.
Yeah.
Because we have some agenda, and then we're not going to fund something which is going to disrupt ourselves, right? I mean, externally, that would be, so we don't want that. However, indeed, there is already some funding and some partnerships, right? I think maybe we need, so I don't have a solution, I'll start with that, because I think we really need to bring together the research community across academia, foundations, industry, research government agencies, and try to rethink what we can do. And maybe, this is just me talking, not Microsoft, but maybe there is room, for instance, even from industry. I talked about actually just Microsoft speaking here with my heart in terms of providing access to resources. But there are other things maybe that we could be doing. When you look at what universities do, and you do research, you also teach, and then not everybody, not all the students go back in academia. Actually, most of them are going to end up in industry, right? And is there something there? So it's not touching fundamental research, but maybe we can help with other places, which then could give more room for fundamental research. And then, so anyway, I think we need to be creative and really convene as research community across all our different agenda, because at the end of the day, I think we all care very much about making sure that there is still fundamental research. I'll finish with one comment, I think. I don't know if you know the quote from Faraday. So when he was asked by, I think it's Gladstone, the British Exchequer, you say? Yeah. So Gladstone was the British Exchequer, and I was going to say a bean counter. So extreme into finance and budget, obviously, but also not very much in favor of the Industrial Revolution. And so, and it is said that Faraday, from one time, he was talking about discoveries and scientific discoveries, and Gladstone said, well, and what is it that for? And Faraday answered something like, well, I cannot tell you, but I can tell you that the probability is high that you will be able to tax it. And so, and that, you know, and when I think about that, I am, well, maybe we need, I don't know if he was a great science communicator, that was definitely a great quote, but I am also, another thing we can do, I think it's become all better at science, at communication, maybe not science communications, but anyway, here are just some thoughts. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think it's going to be, you know, it's obviously a stressful period for fundamental research right now, and not to be doom and gloom, but I think scientific communication and events like this, but also events, the podcasts you do that are targeted at a general audience, it's interesting because I coached Little League baseball in my neighborhood, and a lot of the people that I coach with and their kids, they're not scientists, and they don't know about what's going on with fundamental research, but I sometimes will tell them about what one of my friends at work was working on, that's something really neat and interesting and maybe cell biology and has nothing to do with translation yet, or microscopy, that like the cryo-EM discussion always gets really interesting with my colleagues. And I think more of that, more just trying to get out there and being in the public, because I do think that certainly in the medical field you're seeing it, but I think in other fields as well, there's been this kind of change in trust in the scientific organization. Mm-hmm. And some of that you can't control because it's at a level and with a microphone that none of us have. But some of it is, you know, talking to your colleagues who aren't scientists about the scientific thing that you're working on and why it's so exciting and why it's so interesting. And I think there is that natural curiosity in people. And I think that takes a long time. It's not a thing we can do overnight, but I hope that we can kind of rebuild that sense of connection to science that other people feel that aren't in science all the time, but that they think it's cool and exciting. And of course we want to do that as a community, and that sort of sense of adventure that science means for people, I think can really transform the way people think about scientific funding too.
Yeah. Mm. Last question, go ahead.
Hi, thanks so much. I'm enjoying the conversation. I'm Ratanya Carr. I lead the Division of Gastroenterology at UW. I'm super excited about AI, but everyone else around me is not and scared. So I'm listening to this conversation, and we need so many more earlier steps to help everyone, I think, come on board. I have a new faculty member, and he literally asked me, you know, is there anything at UW that a course I can go to learn the fundamentals of AI? And I could not find one. Maybe they exist. So can you just talk about how, at least in the medical sphere where we tend to be way behind all other industries for most things, how do we get us all up to speed way faster? Because I feel like by the time we are up to speed, it's going to be a whole other technology, whole other problems, and we're still going to be behind. So what role can industry play in that, or foundations, and also some of the work that you're doing at the Cancer Center to really not just accelerate the technology, but accelerate the knowledge of everyone who's going to be impacted by this technology in the medical field?
Yeah, that's a good question. Sharing is caring. How do we do it?
You know, again, I don't know if I have a silver bullet to this, but I mean, I think that the pace of the technology is changing pretty rapidly. I mean, you know, a couple of years ago, you know, ChatGPT shows up on the scene, and now we've got, you know, a raft of companies and organizations spending a ton of resources chasing after this, and then dealing with the fallout of if we've got this incredibly advanced technology, do we actually have the infrastructure to support it? And so then there's a whole race to do that as well. So how do we get educated about this? I mean, there's not a perfect answer to this, because I think that generationally, if we go, you know, to the folks that are, you know, many years younger than all of us here, they're already using many aspects of this technology. I mean, I go to my daughter who's 17 right now, and she's happily playing around with ChatGPT and making videos and doing all kinds of other things that I don't even know how to do. And it's second nature, right? And then there's other folks like my wife and I who we're still trying to see what the limits are, what you can do with the technology. And so I think the role that we as foundations can play for this is that, again, we can provide some support to help, pay for and underwrite some of this part of it. But for us, it's going to be relevant for the kind of work that we want to try to enable. More broadly, for a department or a division like yours, I think it's the approach has got to be that you've got to have some folks who are comfortable with the technology and can bring others along with them. And I also think that just taking a more open and proactive stance to inviting other folks like Microsoft or other organizations who are wedded deep into these technologies, I think that they would be happy to provide some perspective to divisions or departments, because quite frankly, while our medical sector is maybe a little bit slower to adopt this, it's probably one of the areas where you can make the most significant advances, right? I mean, imagine doing, and I'm seeing this today, right? Because I'm involved with some companies that are working on this, but imagine a drug discovery process that normally takes years to do, and now boiling that down and having it take weeks and a few months to get the beginnings of a compound that you can actually develop and put into humans. I mean, that's remarkable, right? All enabled by this technology modality, which is here to stay, right?
Yeah, I can add a little bit. So I don't know, practically speaking, what you could do in your own environment, because I'm not there, but I can tell you what we did, because we went through that 2 years ago. So again, put in the context of industry, but it's similar to what you're saying is, well, first is some people, so you have some people who are excited in something new and you go for it. And other people, something new, I don't touch. And then most of us are in between, right? And so leverage the people who are, this is new, I'm going for it, and have them be a champion for the rest of the organization. And that's pretty much what we did. Like at work, when we started having access and more people had access to the technology, we did it, some team did it more kind of gamifying it. I don't know if it's right for our environment, but we had some session like fun, like when there was DALI 2, it's like, okay, put a prompt and your dream or this or the other, and then wow, the horse has 5 legs, and you also learn about the technology, right, in a fun way, in a kind of demystifying. So, I don't know, again, in your environment, maybe it starts with a small project, right, and you were talking about going from years to weeks. That takes probably expertise, right? Maybe it's something like even writing a summary of something, right? It's like if you have to do it by hand, or I don't know, like having people, I think the best way is to try it. And then having people who can explain what's going on. So they are concretely, including at Microsoft, but I'm sure there are also some other companies who are developing some certificates or learning modules, I don't know exactly how they are called, that people can go and use them to learn. And this is just about learning about AI, right? And then there is the specificity of your own domain, and that, you need to have champions in your area. Mm-hmm.
Such great advice.
I would just say in those, I would have 3 things that you might want to think about. One is there are a bunch of online, even if there's not at UW, in my prior life at Johns Hopkins, I taught these data science courses, and 10 million people took them, and most of them weren't at Johns Hopkins. And so like Coursera and other places like that have really good classes online. We offer some in AI for healthcare through the Hutch. If you go to hutchdatascience.org, you can find all the classes we have there. The second thing is, in academic departments, I come out of an academic discipline that's also a little slow moving. And so you kind of need senior level champions to help move that forward. My experience has been you need at least 1 or 2 senior level faculty who kind of give you the flexibility to try some things out. And I have found that a useful framework is to think of AI not as a replacement for humans, but as a better computer. If you can kind of like get people thinking in that way, like where AI is not coming for us, it's coming to help us, has been really useful to help people think that way and be a little less fearful. And then the third thing is in medical spaces, just like my main collaborator on the Cancer AI Alliance fundraising is the Chief Information Officer of Goldman Sachs. And so he's in the finance field and I'm in the medical field. And we commiserate about AI moves pretty slow in both of these fields because you have to be careful because it's regulated. If you make mistakes, there are real consequences to making those mistakes. And so when I make a recipe at home on ChatGPT, that's very different than if I ask ChatGPT what treatment I should give this patient. And so you have to be a little careful about that. And there's been big efforts both at UW and at the Fred Hutch to try to build infrastructure and systems that are compliant and deal with the sort of regulatory hurdles. And you might want to get connected to the groups that are working on that and through the UW Medicine IT and data departments. They've been really spending some time on that, I know. And happy to connect you if you want to later. So.
Well, thank you all for your questions. Really, really good questions. I think there's one thing we've learned is that innovation requires collaboration. And speaking of which, we're going to all go collaborate in our atrium right after this and continue the conversation. But I just wanted to say a deep thank you to our panelists for coming here. Hopefully this is the first of many discussions we have here. And it's been wonderful. Round of applause for our panelists, please.
Thank you.
Enjoy.
So I'd like to invite everyone to engage in something that our neural dynamics group studies very heavily, which is some foraging behaviors. And so this has really been a great discussion. I'm really, really grateful for all the questions. I'm grateful for our guests. And now we're going to move into our atrium and start to try to build connections over some food and drink. And hopefully this will be one of many times where we all get together in the same room and not just break bread, but also break ideas and masticate them together. Because I think we're all stronger together than we are as individuals. And so I'm very grateful for all you to spend your day with us, and thank you. So make your way to the what do we call it? The atrium, yes.